I never thought that forgetting a cake would end up being the moment they turned on me like I was a stranger. 8 of us sat around the dining table. Family, or so I thought. I had grilled the steaks, cleaned the gutters, fixed the garbage disposal that morning. But I forgot the damn birthday cake for my son-in-law. My daughter Natalie's eyes lit up, not in disappointment, but like a hunter spotting a weak animal. "You're just a useless old burden," she shouted. The word burden hit like a slap. Tyler, her husband, flinched and dropped his fork. The toddler in the high chair kicked and started crying. My granddaughter, Emma, looked at me with something close to panic. I leaned back slowly in my chair. "Well then," I said, voice steady as steel, "you can start paying your own mortgage." Silence. A knife cutting through the tension. Natalie stood so fast her chair clattered to the floor. "You don't get to say that. This is my house, my life." She grabbed my phone off the table and hurled it against the wall. The screen exploded in a mess of glass and plastic. "Jesus, Nat," Tyler muttered, not moving an inch to stop her. I reached calmly across the table and picked up his phone. 911. Yes. My daughter's being aggressive. There's property damage and frightened children. I don't feel safe. I meant every word. She hadn't expected me to do anything. Not the man who'd always backed down for the sake of family. Not the one who paid their bills in silence, fixed their broken things, and watched his late wife's memory get crowded out by louder, newer people. Her hands were trembling. The cops showed up 15 minutes later. The house was awkward and quiet. She was in the kitchen sobbing to no one in particular. Tyler tried to play peacemaker, but I didn't respond to his soft-pedaled nonsense. I left with nothing but my truck keys, a small suitcase, and a quiet resolve that started growing into something I hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. I didn't want revenge. I wanted my name off their house. 6 years earlier, in the polished office of Oak Valley Credit Union, I handed over everything. "I'll just be the guarantor," I'd said. Natalie beamed. Tyler looked relieved, like a man who'd dodged a bullet. I remember the pen in my hand. Smooth, black, heavier than I expected. The banker, some kid in his 30s with perfect teeth, slid the documents across the desk. "This just confirms you're a co-signer, Mr. Callahan." I hesitated. "Wait," I thought. Tyler cut in, all smiles. "It's just paperwork language. You're not really on the hook." I should have walked out. Instead, I signed. And just like that, I was on the mortgage of a home I wouldn't live in. They'd been denied the loan 2 weeks earlier. Low credit, high debt. Tyler had lost his job for the 3rd time, but it wasn't his fault. Natalie was pregnant. Again. They came to me with tears and promises, calling it a, quote, temporary arrangement. I called it love. I transferred $93,000 from my retirement to cover the down payment, paid the first year's taxes, covered the move-in costs, bought the fridge. They hugged me like they meant it. Natalie cried against my chest. "You'll always be welcome here, Dad." Funny how fast that changed. Within a year, my visits required advance notice. Tyler started locking the garage. Natalie said the kids needed routine, which meant I couldn't take them for ice cream unless it was cleared with her first. But I swallowed it. I kept showing up, fixed the leaky faucet, repainted the fence, built the toddler's bed. They gave me a mug that said "World's Best Grandpa" and called it even. Until last night, when forgetting a cake made me a burden. But I'm no fool. That day at the bank may have felt like giving, but looking back now, I see it clear. It was the day I handed them a rope, and they used it to bind me. But rope works both ways. Disrespect doesn't always arrive with fists. Sometimes it shows up in everyday words, said with a smile that dares you to object. It started with the garage. "Stay out of there, Dad." Natalie said one Saturday, arms crossed. "It's Tyler's space now." "Never mind. The tools in there were mine, bought over 40 years of fixing things by hand. The Craftsman chest, the drill press, the toolbox passed down from my father. Tyler couldn't tell a Phillips from a hex, but he sure liked acting like the man of the house." Then came the guest room. "We need it for the nanny," Natalie said, without looking up from her phone. "You're welcome to crash on the couch if you have to." A couch I paid for. I bit my tongue so many times those years, I swear I could taste iron. Told myself it wasn't worth the fight, that I was keeping the peace for the kids. And then the little things started stacking up. They scheduled family trips and forgot to tell me. My calls went unanswered for days. I'd show up with toys, and Natalie would say, "Don't confuse the kids. Let them bond with their parents." Like I was some stranger in their lives. The real crack came last month, at the grocery store. I'd stopped by after a dentist appointment. I recognized Natalie by her coat, the one I'd bought her 2 Christmases ago. She didn't see me. She was on the phone, loud enough to hear 2 aisles over. "God, I wish parents just died on time," she said, laughing. I didn't move, didn't breathe. She rounded the corner and passed me without noticing. I stood there, holding a jar of pasta sauce, my hand shaking. That night I went home and dug through the filing cabinet. It took hours to find everything: the closing documents, the wire transfers, the original deed. And there it was. Line 1. Name, David Callahan. Status, co-owner. Not just a co-signer, not just a helper. I was the one holding the cards. They treated me like a guest in a house I paid for. But I was never a guest. And I wasn't staying quiet anymore. I opened the filing cabinet with the kind of reverence people reserve for graves or loaded safes. Bottom drawer. Behind the old tax returns and insurance statements, the manila folder was labeled in my late wife's handwriting. Mortgage, Natalie and Tyler. She'd written it with hope. I opened it with something colder. The documents weren't just proof of money. They were proof of memory. The wire transfer confirmation, $93,000 from my IRA, dated the week after they begged me for help. A receipt for the fridge. A handwritten note from the bank representative confirming the first year's taxes came out of my account. I even found the HOA welcome packet, addressed to me. Then came the homeowner's insurance policy. Line 3. Primary policyholder, David Callahan. That was it. No more help. No more just the guarantor. I wasn't some extra set of hands they leaned on and then ignored. I was on every paper that mattered. That house didn't belong to Natalie and Tyler. It belonged to me. I sat back in the office chair, let the weight of it settle into my bones. It wasn't relief. Not exactly. It was power, the kind I hadn't held in years. For the first time in a long time, I saw their game for what it was. They thought I was old, slow, sentimental, easy to dismiss, easy to use. They were wrong. I grabbed a clean yellow pad and started writing. Names, dates, accounts. Tyler's truck loan I'd co-signed. The college fund I'd cashed out early. Every expense I swallowed to keep peace. Every moment I traded dignity for closeness. Then I wrote one word, circled it 3 times. Ownership. I gathered every document into a lockbox and slid it under my bed. Tomorrow, I'd make a call to someone who knew how to turn leverage into action. But tonight, I slept better than I had in months. Because knowing the truth is one thing. Having it on paper, that's a whole different kind of power. Meredith Howell didn't ask for small talk. That's what I liked about her. She'd been doing my taxes for a decade, the kind of woman who remembered deductions I forgot I was entitled to. Smart, even-tempered, never rushed. When I walked into her office that Monday morning, with a lockbox full of paper and a look that probably said more than I wanted it to, she didn't ask how I was. She just gestured to the chair and waited. I opened the box and started laying it out, one document after another, in order: wire transfers, the co-signed loan, the insurance policy, even the email Tyler had once sent me thanking me for making it all possible. Her eyes didn't flicker. She scanned each paper like a surgeon inspecting a CT scan. No rush, no doubt. When I finished, she sat back, folded her hands in front of her, and let the silence sit just long enough to matter. "This isn't just financial mismanagement," she said finally. "If they used your name, your money, and kept you out of the decision-making, that's elder financial abuse." The phrase sat between us like a loaded weapon. I didn't flinch. "You believe I have a case? I believe you have leverage," she replied. "And if this escalates, and I suspect it will, you'll need clean documentation, a clear objective, and zero hesitation." I nodded once. No bravado, just fact. "Will you represent me?" She looked at me a long second, then pulled a fresh file folder from her drawer and wrote my name on the tab. "Yes," she said, crisp and sure. "But this won't stay quiet. They'll scream. They'll twist it. Family law always gets ugly." "I don't need quiet," I said. "I need clean." She tapped her pen against the insurance policy. "First step, we record a formal notice of interest on the title. That puts the county on alert, and Tyler can't refinance or sell without your signature. Next, we pull bank statements and prepare to freeze any shared liabilities." Her voice never wavered, and mine didn't either. I left her office with a folder full of steps and the first taste of momentum in months. They wanted me erased, but I'd just hired someone to carve my name into stone. I drove straight from her office to the overlook above Crestview Ridge, the place Caroline and I used to park on summer nights, when the kids were small and sleep came in shifts. From there you could see half the town, its little clusters of rooftops stitched into the hills, like someone had tried to patch a torn quilt with what they had left. I sat there for the better part of an hour, not to reflect or mope. I'd done enough of both, but to make sure that when I went back down that hill, I'd know exactly what I was fighting for. This wasn't about getting even. I wasn't after revenge, and I didn't need apologies. I wasn't hoping to teach Natalie a lesson, or make Tyler admit he'd failed as a provider and a man. What I needed was cleaner than that, tighter, like replacing a cracked beam under a porch. No poetry, just necessity. I needed to reclaim legal control of the house, remove my name from every account that tied me to their recklessness, and get the state's attention on what they'd done in my name. If it cost them their comfort or their image, so be it, because they had already traded my dignity for convenience without blinking. I made a list, not a scribbled pile of thoughts, but a proper ledger, the kind I'd kept back when I was running 2 crews and managing 3 sites at once. I wanted every step visible, every goal written in full, no room for wishful thinking. Reclaim co-ownership officially through county filings. Remove my name from all financial obligations they'd attached me to. Report misuse of my identity and funds to the Office of the Public Guardian. Establish legal access rights to my grandchildren, with or without their consent. Secure and reveal proof of any forged documents. Meredith would build the structure, but I had to supply the materials, and that meant gathering everything, logging every call, recording every lie. If Tyler or Natalie said one more thing that could be used in court, I needed it in writing. No more trusting memory. No more relying on good faith. I folded the page, tucked it in the visor of my truck, and started the engine. When I reached the bottom of the hill, I wasn't angry anymore. I was building something, and I build things well. The letter arrived on a Thursday, tucked between a pizza coupon and a window cleaning flyer. A thick white envelope from Lakeside View Estates Homeowners Association, addressed to me directly, not Natalie, not Tyler, not resident, me. The kind of envelope you open slowly, Because you already know it's going to tell you something you weren't supposed to know. Dear Mr. Callahan, it began, formal and firm. Your HOA account is currently past due in the amount of $2,120. This notice serves as a final warning before additional penalties are applied. I read the letter 3 times. I'd never received an HOA bill before. Not one. For 6 years, they'd gone to Natalie, or so I'd assumed. I'd paid for the house, but I wasn't living in it, so I let myself believe they were taking care of the day-to-day. I hadn't asked questions because I wanted to be respected without having to demand it. That was the mistake. There was a payment history printed on the back, or, more accurately, a history of missed ones, quarterly dues unpaid for nearly 2 years, late fees stacked like bricks. A foreclosure clause bolded at the bottom of the page, threatening legal action if the balance wasn't cleared by month's end. My name on every line, tied to every dollar. They hadn't just cut me out emotionally, they'd left my name on the hook while the ship sank. That's when it hit me. They never took ownership. Not really. They just took possession, like squatters in a place they didn't understand how to maintain. I drove down to the HOA office that same afternoon. I wanted records, payment logs, copies of notices. The woman behind the counter, polite but tired-looking, handed me a printout of every statement ever mailed. My address wasn't on a single one. Everything had gone to the house, addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Tyler Reynolds. They hadn't forwarded anything, hadn't told me the bills were mounting. They hadn't just ignored the debt, they'd hidden it, using my name as the safety net, counting on me to never check. I thanked the woman, walked back to my truck, and added a new line to my legal ledger. HOA non-payment, $2,120. Liability falsely directed. Evidence obtained. I wasn't hunting shadows anymore. Now I had a trail. That night, I sat at my desk long past midnight, surrounded by the steady glow of the monitor, legal pad off to the side, reading glasses perched at the end of my nose. I hadn't touched this laptop in weeks, maybe months. The keyboard felt different under my hands. Not unfamiliar, just underused, like muscle memory had to be coaxed back into motion. But I wasn't tired. I was tracking something. And when you've built houses from nothing but blueprints and bare land, you know what it means to follow a line until it gives you the next one. I logged into the mortgage portal, the same one Natalie had me sign up for years ago, just in case there's ever a problem. Apparently, there had been problems, a dozen of them, and no one thought to tell me. The account had my name front and center. Joint responsibility, joint liability, but only one person paying, me. Or rather, someone pretending I was still involved. 12 verbal authorizations had been logged over the past 3 years, all of them signed off by phone. All of them allowed automatic withdrawals, extensions, even adjustments to the escrow balance. But none of those calls had come from me. I opened each entry, clicked, saved, took screenshots, compiled every file into labeled folders, not just for backup, but for court, for the attorney, for the paper trail that was becoming less of a trail and more of a rope tightening around their own hands. One note caught my eye, a customer service log from last fall. Caller confirmed co-borrower unavailable due to memory issues. Requested no further contact with Mr. Callahan regarding account updates. Memory issues. That was the line they fed the bank. That, I was slipping. Unreliable. Senile. A lie told quietly enough to sound like concern. And they knew. The bank wouldn't push back on something like that. Not in today's world. Easier to go along. Safer. I documented everything. Screenshots went into 3 drives. Local, cloud, and encrypted USB. I backed it up twice and printed the essentials for Meredith. If they wanted to play in the dark, I'd bring floodlights. It wasn't just debt they were hiding. It was a digital smear campaign, coordinated and quiet, but not careful enough. They wanted me forgotten. I'd just made myself impossible to ignore. The call came at 11:42 a.m. Saturday. I was in the middle of replacing a window lock in the garage apartment behind my friend Darren's house, the place I'd been staying since walking out. I let it ring twice before I picked up. I knew the number. Natalie didn't waste time with pleasantries. Her voice came through like it always had when she knew she was losing ground. Breathless, sharp, half accusation, half desperation. "You're destroying my life, Dad." No hesitation, no context, just straight to the theater of victimhood. I let the silence hold a beat longer than comfortable before I responded. "You used my signature, my money, my identity. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was theft," she scoffed. That tired exhale meant to communicate that I was being dramatic, unreasonable, senile. "You're blowing things out of proportion. We were just trying to manage things while you were—" She let the sentence trail off, dangling something unsaid, a hint of decline, instability, that old myth she and Tyler had been building behind my back. I didn't take the bait. "You forged loan extensions, changed contact info, told the bank I had memory problems. That's not managing, that's manipulation. You're not being fair," she snapped, as if fairness was still part of her vocabulary. I hung up before she could spin it further. 2 hours later, Child Protective Services knocked on Darren's front door. A woman with a laminated badge and tired eyes introduced herself and asked if we could speak in private. Darren, stunned but cooperative, went inside. The report, she explained, was anonymous. It claimed I was experiencing confusion, creating an unsafe environment for children, and had made erratic outbursts in front of minors. She asked if I owned any firearms, if I had regular medical care, if anyone had expressed concern about my behavior. I answered every question clearly. I showed her the garage apartment, clean, organized, child-safe. I gave her my doctor's card and Darren's sworn affidavit. She left polite but uncertain, promising a follow-up. That night I sat on the porch and stared out at the streetlight, bleeding amber across the pavement. It was no longer just about money. Natalie had filed a false CPS report, weaponizing the system to paint me as unstable. She wasn't just trying to cut me out, she was trying to erase me completely. By Monday morning, I was back at Meredith's office with a printed binder and a flash drive. We didn't need to speculate anymore. We had facts. And facts don't flinch under pressure. While Meredith cataloged the CPS incident and prepared a formal response, I focused on the debris Natalie and Tyler had carelessly left behind. In the digital world, everyone thinks deleting is enough, but deletion leaves fingerprints. And sometimes, the damning things aren't in the sent folder. They're sitting quietly in the trash. I started with the joint email account Natalie once asked me to help her set up. It was supposed to be for family calendars, photos, just to keep things easy, but they'd forgotten to lock me out. I typed the password I remembered, a combination of her wedding date and their old apartment number, and I was in. Nothing useful in the inbox. But the trash folder was a landfill of arrogance. One email stood out, sent 3 months ago, subject line, loan extension, urgent. The body was simple. Mom can't see these. Delete the PDF. Attached was a scanned signature. Mine, dated after I'd walked away from the property. She had signed on my behalf. I downloaded the email, the attachment, every routing line of metadata. Then I traced the PDF upload timestamp to a scanned file in her cloud drive, one she forgot to permanently erase. It was all there, a full loan extension application, complete with forged initials and a digitally added signature block that didn't match my pen. They weren't even careful, just confident I wouldn't notice or wouldn't know what to do if I did. I flagged 6 more documents. One showed my signature on a new insurance declaration. Another, an escrow adjustment request, both submitted online, both unauthorized. I built a spreadsheet, dated every item, noted inconsistencies. When I handed Meredith the file, she didn't blink. "This is enough to begin forgery claims." "They thought I wouldn't check," I said. "No," she corrected. "They thought you couldn't fight." That night, I added a final entry to my legal ledger. Forged signature confirmed. Digital trail secured. Intent to conceal documented. They'd spent years eroding truth in whispers, but now the evidence shouted in full color. I wasn't guessing anymore. I was building the record they'd pray never sees a courtroom. Meredith didn't schedule our next meeting. She summoned me. When I walked into her office that Wednesday morning, she already had the manila folder open on her desk, pages marked with highlighter, yellow post-its peeking out like warning flags on a minefield. "I need you to sit," she said, her tone even but heavier than before. She slid the page toward me. Not a forgery this time. Not speculation, not misuse of access. This was a legitimate contract, real bank letterhead, real terms, real dates, all of it very real and deeply wrong. "They took out a second mortgage," she said. 6 months ago. I stared at the number printed at the bottom right corner, $140,000. My name listed under borrower, no cosign notation, no qualifier. Just plain and simple, David Callahan. The document had passed through underwriting, signed by a notary I'd never met, time-stamped on a date I could prove I was in Arizona at a VA clinic, 900 miles away. "They used your identity," Meredith continued, "and attached it to a lien that makes you legally responsible for repayment, unless we can prove fraud." I didn't speak right away. Not out of shock, not out of rage, but because the math was already working its way through my head. The original house had been paid down over the years. I remembered the amortization schedules, the early lump payments I'd made to ease their strain. With this new loan, they had stripped every ounce of equity the property had left. "You're saying I now owe what I already paid for," I said flatly. "Unless we sever the contract and prove your signature was forged, yes," Meredith replied. "As far as the lender is concerned, you're on the hook for everything." She laid out the next steps. Forensic handwriting analysis, sworn affidavits from the VA, security camera logs to disprove physical presence, formal fraud complaint through the state's Banking Oversight Division. Every word she spoke was logical, tactical, but the deeper truth pulsed beneath it. My daughter had mortgaged my future without blinking. I left the office with a thumb drive in my pocket and a weight in my chest I didn't yet know how to name. Natalie hadn't just stolen from me. She'd sold off my legacy like it was leftover furniture, and signed my name at the bottom of the receipt. That evening, I sat on the porch of Darren's garage apartment with a chipped ceramic mug and a view of nothing in particular. Just the narrow back alley where utility trucks rolled by too fast and squirrels played in the skeletal trees like they had no idea winter was on its way. The tea had gone cold by the time I noticed, but I didn't bother warming it. There wasn't much warmth left to hold on to that day anyway. The numbers wouldn't stop circling in my head. $140,000. Not hypothetical, not pending. Active debt, tethered to my name like an anchor thrown into deep water. It wasn't the dollar amount that haunted me. It was the fact that I'd already paid it once, in full, in good faith, in love, and now I was expected to carry it again, because someone I raised had decided my signature was just a formality. I kept running through every moment that led to this, every meal I paid for, every lie I let slide for the sake of civility, every time I swallowed discomfort so Natalie could keep her illusion of control intact. I remembered the look on her face when she bought that new SUV last year, the one she insisted was financed through Tyler's bonus, and how I'd nodded along even as the math didn't add up. I remembered how they remodeled the kitchen, on a tight budget, bragging about backsplash tile and custom cabinets while claiming they were barely staying afloat. But what stung most wasn't the fraud or even the money. It was the realization that my generosity had become a given, not a gift, a resource to be accessed, a signature to be borrowed, a man to be tolerated so long as he stayed useful and silent. I thought about Caroline, about how she used to say the hardest part of aging wouldn't be the body giving out. It would be watching people forget what you've already given them. She was right. I hadn't lost everything yet. Not legally, not financially, but something had broken that day. Not with a bang, not with a finality, but with the slow, steady silence of something that would never go back to the way it was. They might think I was still the man who could be guilted into forgiveness. They'd forgotten I was also the man who built things from rubble, and I'd just started clearing the ground. Meredith didn't believe in courtroom drama unless it served a tactical purpose, but when I laid out what I wanted, a meeting, not a confrontation, she leaned back in her chair and studied me the way a chess player does before moving the queen. "You want to bring them into a room and lay it out face to face," she said, "with witnesses. No shouting, no door slamming, just evidence. And control," she added. I nodded. "If they're going to squirm, they'll do it where someone can record it." We picked the HOA's community room. Neutral ground, visible, just professional enough to make them think this was a courtesy instead of a strategy. Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Meredith would be present, quiet at first. I requested the HOA president, a woman named Lacey I'd met during fence repairs the year after the kids moved in. She liked facts, hated drama. She agreed to sit in. I asked Darren to come too, not just for support but as another set of ears. Tyler responded to the invite with a thumbs-up emoji. Natalie replied with, "Sure. Let's clear the air." The gall of it almost made me laugh. Like this was just a misunderstanding. Like I hadn't already seen the documents, heard the lies, watched CPS step onto my borrowed porch because someone wanted to preemptively discredit me. Meredith drafted the official meeting title, Joint Financial and Ownership Review. It sounded harmless, bureaucratic, exactly what they'd expect from a man who was finally ready to, quote, talk it out. I didn't correct their assumptions. Friday night, I packed the files into a hard case, labeled each folder, cued the video walkthrough of the mortgage portal on a USB drive. Every tab had a purpose. HOA delinquency, forged authorizations, the second mortgage, the fabricated memory concerns. Meredith had prepped a printed timeline with notations in red for every forged interaction. It looked less like a legal summary and more like a demolition schedule. At 9 p.m., I stood in front of the mirror and practiced my opening line, not to be theatrical, but to make sure I wouldn't let emotion bloat the message. I wasn't going there to vent. I was going to deliver a truth so exact, so undeniable, that denial itself would start sounding like guilt. The HOA community room was nothing special. Beige walls, flickering fluorescent lights, chairs that creaked if you shifted your weight too fast. But for what I needed, it was perfect. Neutral ground, public, recorded. I arrived early with Meredith and the file case. Lacey from the HOA set up a corner of the room, clipboard balanced on her knee, already scanning the attendance sheet like this was any other Saturday grievance. Darren, steady as ever, sat near the door. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. At 10:03, Natalie swept in with that particular air she wore when she needed to appear composed, but also above it all, sunglasses, pressed blazer, feigned disinterest. Tyler followed, quieter, eyes darting but lips sealed. He took the far chair, leaving Natalie to do the talking. "What is this, Dad?" she asked, gesturing toward the table, trying to keep her tone light, even bored. "This, some kind of ambush?" "No," I said. "It's a record." Meredith handed out folders, 7 pages each, and I connected the USB to the projector. Slide by slide, we moved through the facts. The HOA delinquency, forged authorizations, account access from Natalie's IP address, the second mortgage filed without my consent, No raised voices, no accusations, just data. Lacey followed every detail. Tyler stopped fidgeting. Natalie crossed her arms and leaned back. When we showed the email, the one where Natalie wrote, "Mom can't see these, delete the PDF," her expression didn't change, but the tightness around her eyes betrayed the shift. She muttered, "This is all so dramatic. You're confused." Meredith didn't flinch. "Then we'll bring in a handwriting expert. That will clear things up." The room went still. Natalie glanced at Tyler, waiting for support. He stared at the floor. This wasn't family drama anymore. It was evidence, and it spoke clearly. Control, the thing they held so tightly for so long, had slipped. And I wasn't there to take it back. I was there to show I never lost it in the first place. The room didn't erupt. That would have been too easy. What happened instead was worse. A cold, deliberate unraveling of their story. Meredith stood without needing to raise her voice. She slid a smaller packet across the table. 3 pages, side-by-side comparisons of my signature, real and forged. Even Tyler leaned forward to look. "The signatures are inconsistent with Mr. Callahan's verified handwriting," Meredith said. "These are from the second mortgage, escrow adjustment, and loan extension, all filed after he had revoked access." "No one moved," Meredith continued. "This isn't one mistake. It's a pattern. Multiple forged financial documents submitted electronically, all traceable." She didn't dramatize. She let the dates, IP addresses, file metadata, and voice transcripts do the talking. One showed the mortgage customer representative stating Natalie had requested my contact be removed due to age-related confusion. That clip, short as it was, seemed to drain the last color from Tyler's face. Natalie stayed composed, or tried to. She crossed her arms, gave that dry laugh I'd heard a dozen times when she was caught without an excuse. "You're going to drag your own daughter through court over some paperwork?" Meredith ignored the bait. "This isn't a civil disagreement. It's financial misconduct involving elder identity misuse, and it's already under review by the bank." Then, as if on cue, the bank rep, dialed in via laptop, confirmed that a fraud investigation had been opened. "All mortgage actions on the property are now frozen pending outcome." The final word came from the man near the door, Detective Miles Grant from the Elder Justice Division. He identified himself, badge visible, voice flat. "We're initiating a formal inquiry into elder financial abuse based on the evidence presented." Natalie's sarcasm faltered. "So that's it?" No answer came. Only the sound of pages turning, pens clicking, people recording what they could no longer deny. The power she'd built on silence had cracked under the weight of the record. And that's the thing about evidence. Once it's out in the open, it doesn't go back in the folder quietly. Lacey didn't raise her voice or ask for silence. She simply closed the file in front of her and looked across the table at Natalie, her voice even, almost bored. "Effective immediately. You're suspended from the HOA board. We'll convene a formal review next week. You'll receive written notice." Natalie's mouth opened, but nothing came out that sounded like a defense. Tyler shifted beside her but stayed quiet. Lacey wasn't finished. "Your household's voting privileges are suspended as well, pending the outcome. If any correspondence is sent on behalf of your property, it must come through a verified third party." The bank representative, attending remotely via laptop, unmuted himself next. "Given the presented evidence and Mr. Callahan's formal dispute, our Fraud and Compliance Department is initiating a review. During this process, the second mortgage is frozen. No payments or disbursements will proceed until authentication is complete." I didn't look at Natalie. There was no satisfaction in watching her squirm, only confirmation that the machinery was moving. Slowly, yes, but forward. And then the final shift came from the man by the door. He hadn't spoken yet, hadn't even introduced himself when he arrived. Now he stepped forward and produced a small badge with the state seal. "Detective Miles Grant," he said. "Elder Justice Division. We've received preliminary reports and documentation. Based on what's been presented here, we'll open a formal investigation into elder financial abuse under Iowa statute." He didn't posture, he didn't accuse, he just logged the facts aloud, like someone checking boxes on a list already half complete. Natalie's sunglasses were off now. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was thinner than before. "You're really doing this to your own daughter?" I didn't answer. Not then. I wasn't the one doing anything anymore. The room had turned. The silence she used to fill with manipulation now felt like judgment. What began as a quiet dinner insult had become something bigger, something she couldn't laugh away, twist into pity, or sweep under a rug of shared last names. Control had shifted, and this time it wasn't coming back. It took less than a week for the fallout to ripple through their lives like cracks running through old plaster. Natalie's job, the one she always described as essential whenever she needed to justify a late pickup or an ignored phone call, placed her on administrative leave pending an internal review. Her employer had received an anonymous tip, likely someone in that room, though no one said it aloud, flagging financial misconduct involving a vulnerable relative. They couldn't risk liability, not with her handling client funds. Tyler's quarterly bonus was frozen. His firm had co-signed the second mortgage paperwork as part of a relocation assistance program. The minute fraud was suspected, their legal team put a pause on everything. The look on his face when that email hit his inbox, I imagined, wasn't shock. It was recognition that the house of cards they built with lies and forged signatures had finally tipped. Word spread quickly in their circle. Not through me, I kept my mouth shut, but through the network of neighbors and school committees and weekend soccer bleacher conversations. Natalie was quietly removed from the PTA executive board. No announcement. Her name just disappeared from the newsletter byline and never returned. The hardest shift came not from systems or institutions, but from within their own home. Emma, my granddaughter, was placed with me temporarily by CPS pending evaluation. They didn't say outright that she'd been used as a prop in a false report, but their questions made it clear they wanted her somewhere safe. And I was the only one left who hadn't weaponized her existence. She arrived with one suitcase and a stuffed bear missing an eye. No tears, just quiet confusion and a watchfulness no child should have to learn so early. I made her eggs the next morning, and we sat in silence watching the toaster, as if both of us knew that trust had to be rebuilt, not in words but in minutes spent showing up. For the first time in months, the space I lived in felt like a home again. Not because I'd won anything, but because someone I loved was finally safe under my roof. By the end of the month, things that once felt permanent began to shift, like fixtures pulled from drywall. Meredith finalized the legal filings. The county recorder's office processed the updated deed, removing Natalie and Tyler's claims and restoring my name as sole owner. Not symbolic, enforceable. They could no longer pretend the house was theirs to leverage. A civil ruling followed, ordering Natalie to repay $47,200, the amount traced directly to fraud and unauthorized withdrawals. Tyler was not charged, but the language was clear. Future violations would carry criminal penalties. The forged second mortgage was voided under the state's elder protection statute. The bank absorbed the loss, but their fraud team flagged Natalie for future lending bans across all partner institutions. In plain terms, she'd be lucky to qualify for a gas card anytime soon. My financial risk was dissolved. Meredith ensured every shared liability, from the HOA to insurance accounts, was severed and reissued in my name or canceled entirely. Even legal fees, once a concern, were covered through provisions for senior victims of fraud. It wouldn't bring back the lost years, but it meant I could breathe without looking over my shoulder. I filed a formal complaint with the Iowa Department of Aging. The report was dry, factual, packed with documentation. It wasn't revenge. It was a record. Something to exist long after the shouting had stopped. I didn't gloat. I didn't broadcast. I went back to fixing things. Slowly. Like always. But now, for the first time in years, when I paid for something, a fence post, a water heater, groceries, I knew I was doing it for myself, not for people who saw me as a bottomless favor. And that was enough.